Right, let's welcome to Avry Sports Show now from Team 1010 KXPS in Southern California, Julie Buehler. Julie, how are you doing today?
Avery is spectacular. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I mentioned to you before we started, I'm quite jealous of you being in California and having the privilege of watching the 49ers play in person.
Yeah, it is guilty. I mean, of course, the other California teams, the Chargers and the Raiders, are on the exact opposite end of the spectrum of the 49ers. But, yeah, getting to watch the Niners. In fact, I'm going to San Diego to watch the Niners and Chargers in Week 3 of the preseason. And then September 22nd, I'll be up in San Francisco to watch them as well. So, hey, one out of the three state teams being in the Super Bowl isn't that bad, but I sure wish the Niners could spread a little love to the Raiders and Chargers because those two teams are hurting.
No, they most definitely are. No, speaking of the 49ers, last year, Alex Smith gets hurt, Colin Kaepernick comes in. Before Kaepernick was a start, he was more the Wildcat formation guy. Harbaugh used him in spurts. But to see him play so well and to lead the 49ers in through the NFC, what do you think? What are you expecting from him this year, Julie?
Well, of course, expectations have notched up a bit, and they've done so at a bad time because he keeps losing receivers. Mario Manningham is going to start the season on the pup. Obviously, Michael Crabtree blew out his Achilles, and then the Niners just traded away A.J. Jenkins, and they're hoping that Jonathan Baldwin can come in and kind of complement Anquan Bolden. But, yeah, no question that the expectations are probably unfairly high for Colin Kaepernick when you do what he does, and that's replace a starter that was 9-2, and not only replace him but make Niner fans forget about Alex Smith. Then it makes sense that expectations are incredibly high. But I think also Kaepernick thrives in that capacity. He's the type of guy that the more you doubt him, the more expectations are higher, the more he's going to perform. So I have no doubt that Kaepernick's going to have a sensational year. And I'm just curious as to who he's going to throw to. But I love who the Niners drafted, Vance McDonald, tight end. He's been making some very special catches all through camp and all through, I expect to see more of him in the preseason. And, of course, you also have Vernon Davis. So this is a potent attack. And Kaepernick leading the way, sure, in the headlines, and he's getting a lot of the publicity. But you know what the Niners did so well last year? It was, sure, Kaepernick can put a lot of points on the board, but that defense is a special defense. And you have one of the best linebacking crews in the NFL. You've got one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. And then they add Nnamdi Asomugha. Yeah, they lost to Sean Golston, but you add Eric Reed in the draft. And I think this is going to be a really good year for the Niners defense to be outstanding as well.
With the way a team like San Fran is, and with the way a team like Seattle is looking, will it be a battle between both these teams again for the NFC West title?
Yes and no. I think the NFC West is turning into what the NFC East used to be, and that was 3 playoff teams on a regular basis. And I think there will be 3 playoff teams from the NFC West, and that says a lot because, look, the NFC North has reloaded and the NFC South has reloaded, and it's really just the NFC East that is becoming what used to be the NFC West. But I do think so because, again, when you look at the NFL and what it takes to be successful in the league over the span of a season, you don't look at what gets you fantasy points. You look at a solid pass rush. You look at a team that can consistently perform and execute. And I'm going to point to the 3 teams in the NFC West. I don't think the Rams are quite there yet. I think they're still pretty young, but I like what I'm seeing from the Cardinals. We know they have a beefy defensive line. We know that they have a potent attack if their offensive line can stay healthy and if they can get a quarterback that can get the ball to Larry Fitzgerald. Well, they have that now in Carson Palmer. So I'm looking at the Cardinals. The Seahawks looked ridiculously good on defense against the Broncos just this past Saturday. And I'm looking at the Niners. My only question mark with the Seahawks is how does Bruce Irvin being out of the lineup affect the team? But look, it's an embarrassment of riches up in Seattle. And I'm not talking about Paul Allen's bank account. I'm talking about that defensive line. They're ridiculously good. And so I do think it's the Cardinals, Niners, and Seahawks that have a really good shot at making the playoffs. And then I think the NFC is just going to be loaded this year, though.
We mentioned the injuries with San Francisco. I mean, how smart was it to go out and bring in Anquan Bolden, a guy who had almost 1,000 yards receiving?
Yeah, and the Ravens would not have their Super Bowl ring if it weren't for Anquan Bolden. They wouldn't have made it out of the AFC Championship game if it weren't for Bolden, or even past Denver if it weren't for Bolden. So certainly his expertise is second to none. But I'll tell you this: when Jim Harbaugh says that a player is intense, that makes me take notice. And that's what he said about Anquan Bolden. And Jim Harbaugh loves that about Bolden, and he wants that in his wide receiving crew. You know, Crabtree was kind of seen as a diva. A.J. Jenkins wasn't quite panning out. Bring in Bolden, get the guys rooted and grounded in reality, make sure they're working hard. And I think that's what the Niners really wanted to do with him. And then, oh, by the way, when you have a physical running game, if you can add a physical wide receiver like Anquan Bolden, you have to do it, especially for nothing more than a 6th-round draft pick. So I thought it was a stroke of genius for them to do that. And then, but I mean, Anquan Bolden isn't quite the vertical threat that you need him to be. You know, you need a vertical threat, and I don't know if the Niners have really found that yet. Vernon Davis maybe fills some of that role. He will be lining up at the receiver more this year than he has in years past. Again, Vance McDonald, another tremendous tight end, just as good blocking as he is receiving. But I think that's the big question: is how do the Niners make their passing attack more vertical in order to really keep defenses on their toes?
So we're going to have to find a way. And no, offensively with this team, the Niners have Frank Gore running back. And I know he's 30 years old now. And that's always the age where people say a running back starts to break down. How much of the workload will he get this year? Considering the backfield for San Fran looks a little bit crowded going into the season.
Sure, you've got Michael James and Kendall Hunter back there. But look, Frank Gore, there's no question who the leader of the pack is. There's no question who the favorite horse in the stall is, and it's Frank Gore. But would I mind if they kind of went easy on him in the regular season to save him for the postseason? Not at all. In fact, Avry, I contend that had Frank Gore gotten one more carry in the Super Bowl, the 49ers would have scored a touchdown, and they'd have their 6th ring and be tied with the Steelers for most in NFL history. But unfortunately, they didn't give him that carry. He was in the backfield looking for someone to block instead of holding the ball and crossing the goal line. So I wouldn't mind at all if they keep Frank Gore very healthy, you know, maybe give him 15, 20 carries a game and then save him for the postseason where he can pound the ball down someone's throat.
No, it'd be a very smart move in their mind for the Niners. I know moving from San Fran to a team that's been struggling since I was in grade school, showing how long they've been a bad team, the Oakland Raiders. You have Matt Flynn now quarterback. Can he be a guy that leads his team to maybe 8 wins if they're lucky?
Well, look, I mean, Matt Flynn, you can have Peyton Manning be the quarterback of that team, and they're going to be hard-pressed to get to 8 or 9 wins because there are so many holes on that roster. And I'll start with the defensive side of the ball. There's not a pass rusher on the line, period, in the story. They let go of Tommy Kelly. Richard Seymour, he's gone. They picked up Vance Walker, and okay, good defensive tackle from the Saints. I get it, run stopper, fine. But there's nobody that's going to provide pressure. And the problem is that if you have to scheme pressure week in and week out, elite quarterbacks pick up on that. And they play Andrew Luck week 1 and Peyton Manning week 3. And then they go through a gauntlet. They've got, and this is off the top of my head, so forgive me for not knowing exactly, but they've got the Steelers on the team. They've got on the schedule. They've got the Redskins on their schedule. They have to go through Dallas and on Thanksgiving Day and play Tony Romo. I mean, they face some serious passers in this regular season. So I don't care about the quarterback position on this Raiders team. To take a look at this roster, you need Pineful to clean your hands. It stinks. And that's part of the process. I mean, they dumped a ton of contracts. They want all this dead money off the books. It's almost $50 million in money that is just they have to pay, but they're not getting production out of it. And then after 2013, they'll take a serious look at the team and start drafting in a different way, in a more reasonable way. But this team it's going to be kind to say it'll win 4 or 5 games this season. This is not a good team. You've got Darren McFadden, who with the power running game will improve, and I think he'll be a solid fantasy play. And then of course Marcel Reese, you can't ignore him. He's always very consistent. But beyond that, I don't know if there's another player on the team that you're going to touch. And that was with a healthy offensive line, a healthy Jared Beldier at left tackle. Now that's gone. He tore his tricep out for the season. And you're looking around going, are you kidding me? We went from bad to even worse. And with no Beldier, you're looking at a Matt Flynn that doesn't have really competent receivers, who isn't on the same page with him. There's not much chemistry between the two of them. And so, you say, is Matt Flynn the guy? And I'd say absolutely not. But, oh, by the way, I don't think there's a guy on the face of the planet that would be a quarterback of this team and take him to an 8-8 record.
Ouch. I mean, that's That's tough news for Raider fans. I know you mentioned the holes in this team. I mean, you bring back Charles Woodson, but Charles Woodson is 78 years old. I mean, you're not getting the same Charles Woodson that you had 10, 11 years ago.
No, you really can't. And I mean, he'll be playing safety, so that's a little easier than him playing cornerback. And they have some decent cornerbacks. Jenkins comes to mind, but I'll tell you what, in this game against Drew Brees, Tracy Porter, when he was thrown out, gave up a perfect passer rating. So are you kidding me? I mean, here's Tracy Porter. You expect him to come in with some leadership. He's got a Super Bowl ring, and you'd expect him to come and offer a solid performance. But that doesn't seem to be happening for the Raiders. They can't seem to get everybody on the same page. And, some teams, they have a lousy roster, but they overperform because of certain extenuating circumstances. For the Raiders, it seems that even if they have a decent roster, they underperform. And I don't know if that's a cultural shift that needs to happen within the franchise that, the Saints went through and really the 49ers went through when Jim Harbaugh came along. But it seems to me they need something more than just an improved roster. This team is very on very shaky ground, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there is a regime change. Reggie McKenzie came in and has literally clean slated the whole franchise almost. And I think, too, in the back of everybody's mind is the big move. I think the Raiders, the fact that they haven't renewed their lease, they say they will not sign another short-term lease up in Oakland. I think the Raiders have their sights set on L.A., and that's probably in the back of their minds also. So all those extenuating circumstances surrounding the franchise make it a little bit tough to focus on that oblong ball come Sunday.
They would be the first team to move back to the same city twice in league history if they do go back to LA again.
Right, but it makes sense. I mean, there is a huge Raiders fan base here in LA, huge.
No, there is.
And right now, the LA Coliseum is being renovated by USC, so the Raiders could potentially use that as kind of a stopgap while they are getting Farmers Field built. So if that happens, Avry, that would be a huge game changer for the whole franchise. Huge game changer. I mean, you're talking about a franchise that is in the bottom 10% of the NFL in terms of franchise worth, all of a sudden getting shot out of a cannon and likely going to the top 5 in terms of worth because of their market value.
Absolutely would. I know the Farmers Field project, that's supposed to be by the Staples Center, is it not?
Correct.
Wow, I mean, that would be fantastic for them right there in that whole arena district that LA has.
Yeah, it'd be huge. I mean, it'd be huge. Like I said, just a total game changer.
Going back to an on-field aspect of the Raiders, if you're Dennis Allen, do you basically hope that this team can win 2 games?
If you're Dennis Allen, you hope you can keep your job. Look, the Raiders fired their Hugh Jackson after an 8-8 season. I mean, if you got back-to-back 8-8 seasons, how do you fire the head coach? But they wanted to. They wanted to have a clean slate and start afresh. So enter Dennis Allen, the youngest head coach in the NFL. But you might remember back when Lane Kiffin was at the helm and he was the youngest head coach in the NFL. That didn't work out very well. Josh McDaniels held that moniker for some years, for I believe 1 year, and that didn't work out well for him. So, youth is not generally served well at the head coaching position in the NFL. We'll see if Dennis Allen can buck that trend. I don't know if he can. I think Reggie McKenzie is probably the guy to lead that franchise forward, but I think they're going to need a new head coach.
With the last California team in the National Football League, San Diego Chargers, the team that's always stuck at being 8-8 or 7-9 and failing in the divisional round, how much work do the new head coach and new GM in the form of Mike McCoy and Tom Telesco have before this team is back among the elite of the AFC?
The biggest problem was, and God bless Norv Turner, but he took over a team and basically became a yes man to A.J. Smith, the general manager at the time. And you really saw how that depleted the roster. And again, the Chargers used to have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And when Marty Schottenheimer was let go after the 2006 season, what a lot of people don't understand is he also lost, or the Chargers, I should say, also lost the defensive coordinator, Wade Phillips, and the offensive coordinator, Cam Cameron. So the entire coaching staff was rebuilt under Norv Turner as the head coach. That was a disaster waiting to happen. As I mentioned, it was really just because they became yes men to A.J. Smith. So all of his drafting strategy, and A.J. Smith used to be known as the guy that was pulling the diamonds out of the rough, found Antonio Gates and out of a free agent signing and things like that. Well, that quickly faded when he didn't have anybody saying no, and he quickly got a very bad roster on his hands. So you don't have a very solid offensive line. I mean, you're protecting $100 million quarterback in Phillip Rivers with a roller coaster ride, a carousel at left tackle. And the defensive line isn't much better. So this, again, is a very weak roster. You have the strength of Eric Weddle, and that's about it in the secondary. And how about the fact that they can't seem to keep a wide receiver healthy? They had to sign Ujiri Romo-Tutu because Denario Alexander went down, Malcolm Floyd went down, Eddie Royal, we just went down with a bruised lung. I mean, it's those type of things that it just really piled on. But that being said, while that would pile on and be a very negative thing for a Norv Turner-led team, I really think that Tom Telesco, the new general manager, brought from the Indianapolis Colts, who was there to watch the Colts go from 2-14 and flip the script and go 11-5 in 2012. I really think he has the inherent optimism that you need to rebuild a franchise. It's going to take time. He's got that patience. He watched Ryan Grigson for the Indianapolis Colts strip down that 2-14 roster and rebuild it into a playoff team. So Tom Telesco has that knowledge, that hope, that sort of expectation inside him already. And so I believe that is going to be the real key here, is him being the steadying force through all these ups and downs. And every team has injuries, so we can expect that. But all the while, I think the Chargers are going to be in a little bit of a rebuilding process. A.J. Smith left them with a very sad roster.
No, I agree with you in the rebuilding part. I know you mentioned the injuries. Their top drafting, Manti Te'o, he's already injured with a sprained foot. That's not starting things right at all.
Yeah, I don't know that that's really going to be a key. Manti Te'o is the type of kid that if he's played in the right system, if he's played in the right scheme, he'll do well. He's not your typical all-world linebacker that's just going to be, a ball hawk. So him getting an injured foot, not a huge deal. But you're right. I mean, just the fact that he played 9 snaps, I think, and then it got his foot injured. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, every team has to deal with injuries. I mean, you look at what's happening in Denver with Dan Coppin blowing his ACL, Champ Bailey having a severe sprain, even Wes Welker with a minor sprain. I mean, injuries are everywhere. It's just how a team can steady those turbulent waters in order to make it through the preseason and then the even more turbulent waters of the regular season.
No, it's true. I know we mentioned Phillip Rivers. I mean, I call Phillip Rivers the Jay Cutler of the AFC because he's a guy, he can make a brilliant throw and on the next play throw a ball in triple coverage. I mean, will there be a time where San Diego says Rivers is not their guy anymore?
Will there be a time? Maybe, but there's going to have to be another quarterback that comes available to replace him, and that quarterback, that opportunity hasn't presented itself thus far. San Diegans really, really love Phillip Rivers. He's a good guy. He does a lot in the community. And you also have to realize that, like I said, he hasn't been given an offensive line to work with. He's almost got no running game. Ryan Matthews breaks a clavicle every 4 snaps. He's got a tight end that is a Hall of Famer for sure, but is old, and Antonio Gates has certainly lost a step, and he did last year, and now he's once again the premier receiving threat that they have on the team. I mean, when you're making a star of Denario Alexander and Malcolm Floyd, then I think Phillip Rivers needs a little bit more credit. I do think, though, that he did regress last year. He was making bad throws, and we saw in the preseason game against the Chicago Bears, to your point, that he literally exchanged interceptions with Jay Cutler, and that happened one play after another. So to that point, I agree. I think he does take a little bit too much on himself. But at the same time, can you blame the guy? He's getting paid the $100 million contract, $100+ million contract, and yet he has to feel like he has to make something happen because there's really not many other people around to make it happen. But I think Phillip Rivers is the type of guy that if you were to put more pressure on him, I think he would excel. I don't think he would falter.
Julie, it was an absolute blast having you on, chatting about the California-based NFL teams. Let's do it again sometime.
Thank you for having me. It's always good to talk football. I'll do it anytime anybody gives me a microphone.